Welcome to Built, Wired, and Secured. I'm Alex Morgan. In today's episode, we're discussing UPS reality check, batteries, runtime, and resilience in commercial buildings, what it is, why it matters, and what decision makers need to know to avoid costly mistakes. Joining me today is Michael Harrington as we break down real-world lessons, common challenges, and practical takeaways you can apply immediately. Let's dive in. Cold open, picture a short, neighborhood-wide outage, 3 minutes, and the building's UPS was expected to keep critical systems running. Instead, tenant leasing card readers went dead, the lobby doors failed to respond, and a bank of point-of-sale terminals rebooted unpredictably. People were safe, but operations stalled and tenants demanded answers. That's the kind of mismatch between expectation and reality we'll unpack today. Why this matters. Owners, facilities teams, and IT often assume UPS equals guaranteed runtime. In practice, batteries age, tests are staged or incomplete, and ownership gaps mean nobody is accountable when the alarm sounds. Over the next 10 minutes, we'll cover causes, trade-offs, operational implications, and a short checklist you can use on your next site walk.
Thanks, Alex. Glad to be here. Let me start with a straightforward question most property leaders should ask. What breaks if this goes down? If the answer includes tenant-facing systems or business-critical IT, treat the UPS as a primary asset, not an afterthought.
Segment 1. Causes. Michael, walk us through the common failure modes you see in the field.
3 big buckets. First, battery aging. Batteries lose capacity over years, sometimes dramatically faster than paperwork suggests. A unit rated for 10 years effectively behaves like a shorter duration battery after 4 to 6 years if maintenance or environmental conditions are poor. Second, testing that doesn't reflect real loads. Running a UPS on a light, staged load or a short simulated outage gives a false sense of security. And third, ownership blind spots. Who documents load profiles? Who owns runtime targets? And who signs off on maintenance? When those questions are unanswered, the UPS becomes a silent single point of failure. From an operational standpoint, those blind spots are what bite you after the lights come back on.
You mentioned testing. Too many teams rely on quick vendor-run tests. How should testing be done instead?
Test with realistic loads and duration. If tenants expect 10 minutes of runtime, test for 10 minutes at representative load, not at 20% load for 30 seconds. Include battery discharge tests under actual environmental conditions, and log voltage, current, and temperature so you see performance trends. Also, treat genius mode acceptance tests skeptically. Those are fine for initial commissioning, but you need scheduled, instrumented verification over time. That's the difference between a checklist and an operational assurance program.
Segment 2. Trade-offs. Let's get into architecture. Centralized versus distributed UPS, and how runtime targets affect cost and resilience.
Centralized UPS can be efficient for a single long-run objective, one battery bank, one maintenance contract, but it concentrates risk. If that central bank fails, multiple systems go dark. Distributed UPS, deployed at door controllers, comm closets, or critical racks, reduces single-point failure exposure and often aligns runtime more closely with what each system actually needs. The trade-off is cost and maintenance complexity, more units to monitor and service. You decide based on criticality and tenancy. Ask, are we protecting a whole floor's meeting rooms or a few racks that host emergency services? That answer directs whether centralized savings are worth the operational risk.
Parallel UPS strings can provide immediate failover, but they require matching equipment and coordinated maintenance to avoid common mode failures. Staged redundancy, where one UPS supports critical load and another picks up non-critical loads, can be more cost-effective, but it needs clear load prioritization and automated transfer logic. Again, document the priority map and test failover paths. If you don't know which loads will be shed or kept during transfer, you can't reliably predict tenant impact. That's fine until it fails. Then tenants feel this immediately.
Segment 3. Operational implications. Michael, walk us through maintenance cadence, documentation handoffs, and vendor oversight in a way that facilities and IT can act on.
Start with an owner's checklist.
At minimum, an annual full load or representative load discharge test, quarterly health checks that record capacity and internal temperatures, and clear battery replacement triggers tied to capacity thresholds, not just years in service. Second, require vendors to provide trend logs and a failure mode report after each service visit. Third, formalize handoffs between construction, commissioning, and operations. Load studies, single line diagrams, and a runtime target document should move with the asset. Finally, define accountability. Who signs the uptime SLAs for tenant critical systems? If it's unclear, invest the time to assign it now. Otherwise, you'll fight it during an outage.
Expert examples. 2 quick lessons from the field. Michael, give us a low-cost mitigation and a capital-level correction that changed outcomes.
Low-cost mitigation. We added distributed UPS modules to a handful of comm closets that hosted tenant access control and payment terminals. The modules were inexpensive, monitored remotely, and cut outage complaints by 80% for a single-digit % of the original capital estimate. Capital correction. At a large multi-tenant campus, we replaced an aging centralized battery bank with a modular, serviceable system and split critical loads onto a separate dedicated UPS. The upfront cost was significant, but it eliminated a recurring failure mode and extended usable runtime during sustained outages, saving tenant disruption costs over a 3-year horizon. Both moves started with a simple question: what are we trying to protect, and how much downtime are we willing to tolerate?
Key takeaways. A short checklist listeners can use on the next site visit. First, identify critical loads and document runtime targets. Second, verify tests are performed at representative loads and durations and require trending data. Third, set battery replacement criteria tied to measured capacity, not just age. Fourth, consider distributed UPS for tenant-facing high-impact systems to avoid single points of failure. Fifth, assign clear ownership for maintenance, testing, and SLA accountability. Those 5 steps reduce surprises and make vendor conversations far more productive.
If I can add one final operational note, include realistic failure scenarios in tabletop exercises. Walk through a 3-minute outage, a sustained 15-minute outage, and a battery failure in warm weather scenario. Ask what breaks for each and document the mitigation. Those simple exercises align teams faster than a 100-page manual ever will.
CTA. For a printable UPS audit checklist and more resources, visit gdstechnology.com/UPS-audit. You'll find the checklist laid out by priority, a sample testing cadence, and a starter template for vendor reports. That wraps up this episode of Built, Wired, and Secured. Today, we explored realistic expectations for UPS systems, why batteries, testing, and ownership matter, and why those factors should shape your planning and maintenance decisions. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us. Until next time, make sure the systems you're responsible for are built to last, wired with intention, and secured for the real world.